Okay, let's take a look at some Valerian artwork, since Valerian is in a new movie, which I just saw the other day, and it's an excellent movie. I don't pretend or claim to be an expert on Valerian. There's been more than 20 graphic novels in the series, and I've only read 7 of them, but that's 7 more than a lot of people have read, so let's just take a look at a few of them. You'll notice that the series, first of all, I'm not going to try and pronounce the artist's name. The name of the artist is got 2 accents in it, and it's a French name, and I will probably mispronounce it. I'll just take a wild guess and say Miseres or Miseries. I hope it's not Miseries. But I don't know how to pronounce his name. Excellent artist, well deserving of acclaim. If you're familiar with Star Wars, then you're familiar with the work of this artist, since a lot of the designs in Star Wars are stolen directly from Valerian. Yes, stolen. Absolutely swiped from Valerian. Look, there's the Millennium Falcon out there. No, that's Valerian's spacecraft. Valerian and Laureline, the 2 lead characters. This is the first graphic novel, City of Shifting Waters. This came out in the 60s, I believe in 1968, long before there was any global warming scaremongering. And yet this is a story about the New York City, which has been flooded and turned into a disaster area. And here, if we open it up here, we can see the Statue of Liberty actually collapses in this sequence while Valerian is coming in on his boat, and the entire city has become something of a disaster region. One thing to notice about Valerian is that the faces and the human beings can be very cartoony. These can be very cartoony figures, and yet the settings, if you look at the settings that they're placed into, are very three-dimensional and realistic and really give you a good sense of place. So the settings are fabulous, and the artist very wisely, I think, has decided not to overdo the realism on the human characters so that he can go and be more expressive and more cartoony with them, and the whole mixture works out to be very, very satisfying mixture. Let's just skip ahead here. Take a look at, I wanted to show you the very first alien robot design in Valerian is this one right here in the first book, and you can see it's a very unconventional design. It's not your stereotype lost in space robot. They have some sort of fluid inside of them, and that is motivating them here, and very minimal mechanics. And I noticed the spotting of blacks, the creation of silhouettes here to create dramatic effect, and the use of lighting. True master's touch when you can use blacks like that. Moving on here, just take a look at a few things in this one, then we'll move on. I wanted to show you here's a nice dramatic shot. I mean, even though the art of the people is a little cartoony, don't think that the drama and action is at all skimped on, because it's not. The storm is very dramatic storm footage, and then look at the drama and look how cinematic this is, the calm after the storm, the morning after the storm. And I want you to get some buffalo running there. Very nice shot there. Please notice, though, I wanted to point this out, this character, if you're my age or even approaching my age, you might recognize this character. If you're a young person, you're like, who is this goofy looking man? And I don't know if that's big enough for you to really see. Let me zoom in a little. Oops, I lost it. Oh, I'm going to have to change my angle there. Who is this goofy looking man? Well, I think it's pretty obvious to us old folks that right there is Jerry Lewis. Right? That's clearly Jerry Lewis here in this shot. And the French love, let me put this back, the French love Jerry Lewis. The French consider Jerry Lewis to be one of the best cartoonists of all time. And God knows why. I love Jerry Lewis. Jerry Lewis was a very popular comedian when I was a young kid, a young whippersnapper back in the 1960s. I'll put that all the way back. And very popular comedian. A lot of critics didn't like his work. A lot of the more critical, snooty, pretentious critics thought that Jerry Lewis was sort of a lowbrow slapstick clown, which he was in a sense, but he had a lot of layers and textures to his work, and he's actually quite a brilliant performer. But the French loved him. The French always loved him. And of course, Valerian was published first in France before it became a big international hit. And Jerry Lewis appears in the first Valerian. Here's a good example of a nice science fiction element being created there. And we're looking through here. We see like all sorts of different settings in Valerian from we started out in a flooded city, and here we are in this desert. We're in caves, we're in space. Here's Yellowstone, which seems to be somewhat burned off. And this, and we got some dramatic volcanic activity here. I don't want to really give away the ending, but look at the wonderful space station there. That's a good example of how they create these wonderful elements for science fiction. Let's move on here to the third one. I don't have the second one. World Without Stars, another good Valerian. Oh, look at this shot here. There's the good view of the Millennium Falcon. I'm sorry, it's not the Millennium Falcon, it's Valerian's spaceship. In the movie, they reference the Federation that Valerian supposedly works for. We all know that the Federation was on Star Trek, and of course pulp fans know that the Federation was created by Edmund Hamilton back in the 30s for his long-running series of Captain Future novels and novelettes, and that Edmund Hamilton used the Federation throughout his publishing career straight into the 50s, which is where Star Trek stole it from. But Valerian was not called the Federation in the graphic novels. They changed it to the Federation for the movies. I don't know why they did that, but it's called, the organization he works for is called Galaxity in the graphic novels. And I should mention that they disappear after the first half of the graphic novels and aren't in the second half. Galaxity is destroyed. There we see the Millennium Falcon, Valerian ship landing. Just looking through here, we've got some very nice science fictional elements here. Again, attention to detail on the settings, the place, the establishing shots is wonderful. You know, the natural formations of rock and the whole sense of being on an alien planet is wonderfully created here. And look at this great cityscape here. Really gives you a feel for being in a foreign place. Look how big that sun is. It must be roasting hot there. Here we see a great underground labyrinth of tunnels here. You can see why designers for Star Wars would want to steal from this strip, because it's so well thought out and fully realized. Nice contrast here between the foreground, use of blacks there to separate it from the background, a good feeling of Valerian lurking and spying there. Here we see all different kinds of cultures in Valerian. Some of them use spaceships, some of them ride horse-like animals, some of them are more modern, some are more primitive. This strip is a very good example of that as we move into a wonderful combination here from the spaceships to the more primitive aspects of culture, and just look at how beautiful these, how fully realized these cityscapes and establishing shots are. They're just magnificent. This is a big part of Valerian's appeal, and the costuming, the creativity of the costuming is awesome. Just the creativity all around, the amount of work that goes into it is just awesome. And I don't know I can't remember what's going on here, and I probably wouldn't explain it to you if I could. I don't want to give away I'm going to give short shift to the final pages here. I don't want to give away any endings, but now if you've never read a Valerian, you should go to Libris. That's ALIBRIS, which is my go-to site for ordering books. I don't make a nickel off endorsing that. It's just a great place to find used books, and you can get them from all different sellers there. It's a platform where different sellers list their merchandise, and if you put in the title of a book, you'll probably get a dozen different sellers and a dozen different prices, and you can take your pick. So go to a Libris and look up this graphic novel. If you don't have any Valerians and you want to try one, look up Welcome to Alphalalal. This is probably my favorite of all the ones I've read. It's just a really charming story. It's Valerian, the fourth one in the Valerian series. Here we see a great shot of the ship that is not the Millennium Falcon approaching the planet. It's typical of Valerian, these great establishing shots. And we see some space action going on here. Just taking a look through here at some of the things going on. What is going on with Laureline there? She's being rescued by some aliens who are helping, very helpful. And we're nice spaceship there. And we can really see why this strip has done so well internationally. It's never really gotten a fair shake here in America, but just look at this. Techno-Regard. Techno-Regard is the name of this city. It's an all technological city in the middle of nowhere. How is that for a shot of a bureaucrat, huh? Does this close-up just screams bureaucrat? You know, everything in Valerian screams out what it is. And here comes Laureline with her alien friends, and these aliens are causing trouble throughout, causing so much trouble throughout, and you just see the look on his face there that everything's gone to hell in the handbasket with these aliens mucking up the works. We're just taking a look at the dejected bureaucrat. He just cannot get his way. Oh my goodness. Now look, how's that for a science fiction shot, huh? Is that great or what? And we see all different settings. We see alien creatures here. There's a fight with the alien creatures there. I'm going to skip right past a lot of this stuff. Check this out. This pure science fiction illustration there. Wonderful. They're trying to convince these aliens to go on a reservation for their own good. These primitive aliens, but the primitive aliens are just laughing at them the entire time because they are actually a lot smarter than they have credit for. Got some great dramatic pages here at the end. Here, a lot of Valerian stories don't end with a big fist fight. That's something that the American comics do. But a lot of Valerian stories end with more like a novel, with some sort of conflict. Yes, conflict is resolved, but it's not always resolved through a fist fight or a gun battle or a chase. Sometimes it's resolved through a humorous resolution. Sometimes it's resolved through a dramatic confrontation, but the confrontation might be verbal or it might not be. They're not stereotype and they're not formula. And they're not predictable. Now this is the one, if you've seen the movie, and I hope you see the movie because the movie's excellent, this is the one that the movie is loosely adapted from, Ambassador of the Shadows. And if you've read this one, then you know why they had to rewrite it to make it into a movie, because this is basically a solo adventure for Valerian's partner, Laureline. And Valerian is kidnapped very early on in this adventure, and she does most of the adventuring without him. So that's why they felt they had to rewrite it, I'm sure. And they incorporated aspects from different graphic novels into it. Here we see a typical Valerian beginning, you know, coming in to the planet and coming in closer and closer until you see what's going on. And some very wonderful science fiction stuff going on here. Here we see this wonderful full-page shot of Central Point. Central Point is the city of 1,000 planets in the movie. It's the place where 30 million aliens from all different cultures coexist in peace with all their separate spheres and separate areas of influence, even separate atmospheres and environments. And they talk about that here. And show some of the different alien creatures that live there. And here we finally get to Valerian and Laureline in their spaceship, and they're getting some orders here from another military bureaucrat type. And just look at, science fiction fans, just look at this sequence. Just look at how wonderful this sequence is. You've got the black, look at the spotting of the blacks. Now if you picture this spaceship, if this stuff was behind it instead of the black, you'd be losing it visually. but when it's coming in off the black space and there's the spaceship starting, it gives you a real feeling of movement, of moving in. And on this panel, the black shifts to above it. As we see it, we create a real feeling of coming down, and the stuff here, which is, you know, in the distance here, has become close-up stuff, and then we move in for an even closer shot of them disembarking in a long shot to give you a sense of place. And look at how the blackness of space has moved off into the edge as we're entering into the spaceship. Okay, and now if you've seen the movie, here's part of the movie, the converter that can make whatever it eats into more. There it is, how it appears in the comic. And just look at how great they use the use of two-point perspective here. Most of these perspectives are faked in, but here the artist uses a two-point perspective that has obviously been worked out pretty closely to create a sense of space. And this is a great visual sequence as the ambassador moves in and he's shaking hands, and then he just started his little speech, his little welcome speech, when the wall is burned through and they are attacked. And they are attacked with the sticky guns that you saw in the movie that leave you in a cocoon. And Valerian and Laureline managed to put their helmets on. But they are attacked, and the ambassador is kidnapped, and Valerian follows and winds up on the kidnapped ship, which leaves Laureline to spend the entire rest of this adventure seeking him. And that's probably the main reason they wanted to rewrite it. And here we see the converter converting. Now, these creatures, if you saw the movie, you recognize them. They're in the movie, the three creatures that sell information. And of course, if you're a Star Wars fan, you recognize the long-nosed, winged, short, mercenary merchant type, which was stolen from these creatures and inserted into Star Wars. I'm sure you'd recognize that if you're a Star Wars fan. I don't remember the name of the Star Wars character, but it's a copy. Now here we see a race of people that are kind of centaur-like. They appear in more than one Valerian novel. And there's some combat here, there's some ritual combat here before Laureline can meet the boss. And she's paying off everybody with the converter throughout this adventure. Now here we see the disreputable part, the disreputable alien brothel that appears in the movie. And people partying. And here's Laureline's scene where the alien, the shapeshifter, is trying to give her sexually what might be appealing to her. But this is what the shapeshifter actually looks like. It's like a blob of protoplasm. The shapeshifter was played by Rihanna in the movie. And here we see a scene that is directly in the movie where the shapeshifter goes over top of her and the two of them become this alien creature, and you'll recognize that creature being one of the creatures in the film. And in order to penetrate into their area, and here we see an elder, one of those creatures, and the whole thing kind of falls apart there, and they have to run for it. And there's and here's another thing which is in the film, the giant undersea creature, which they steal the jellyfish parasite from, and then Laureline puts that over her head and communes with it in order to see what it knows. And this character is played by the bearded sailor in the film. This character is in there. And here we finally meet the alien race that is in the beginning of the film. They live in this paradise with the giant seashells and the cliffs made out of crystal, which I didn't quite make it into the film, but they're portrayed a little bit differently in the film. But you can see the definite similarity there. The film has actually, I think, taken this design and actually improved on it a little bit and made it look a little more exotic and a little more alien. Wonderful design on this race of people in the film. Here we see Laureline coming out of her vision. Reunited, and it feels so good. Yep, and the whole thing is resolved at the end. I don't want to show you the endings. Now, if you're looking for a Valerian book, this is also one you should look for, the New Future Trilogy. What's wonderful about this is that these other books, like I said, there's nearly 20 these graphic novels, or more than 20 now of these graphic novels that have been published internationally. This series, bringing them out in individual book form, they're big books, but they're thin. This series, I think, only printed the first 6. It may have gone to the first 8, but it never finished printing all of them. So, this book is essential if you're an American and you're looking for Valerian, because this book contains 3 of the graphic novels from the middle of, and there's the covers of the 3. The New Frontier, On the Frontiers is one, The Living Weapons, and The Circles of Power. And this is from the middle of the series, and these 3 tell the story about how Galaxity, the organization they work for, is basically destroyed, and Valerian and Laureline become freelancers, free agents, who are no longer working as agents of Galaxity. And this contains, like I said, 3 complete graphic novels, so you'll probably want this. And just look at how Star Wars this is. If you doubt with me when I say that Star Wars stole things from Valerian, just take a look at this sequence here, where it comes in closer on the ship and closer and closer, and then you get inside the ship and you're talking to the 2 people who are wearing the not Darth Vader armor, because Darth Vader's armor is black, but they're aboard sort of a cruise ship that's transporting all sorts of aliens. And if we look here at the various alien species, we can really just imagine the Star Wars designers just poring over this when they created the bar sequence in the original Star Wars. A lot of these aliens are very Star Wars-esque. But it's very Valerian-esque, it should be. And here we see the aliens gambling and partaking in various pleasures. Let's just skip forward some. There's a very Star Wars shot right here, but I don't want to reveal too many plot details. Oh, here we go. What is this? What is that, huh? I guess he shifted into warp drive, eh? Well, I don't call it that, but obviously it's a huge increase in speed. Here the stars are standing still, and there they're zipping past, so that would be faster than light travel, if you can make the stars look like they're zipping past. You know, they say that even at the speed of light, the stars would not appear to change. If you looked out the window, if you were in a spaceship traveling at the speed of light and looked out the window, the stars would appear to be completely unmoving, because even at the speed of light, it takes you years to get from one star to the next star. So the only way you get a visual image like this when you look out the window is if you're going many times faster than the speed of light, which is essentially like teleporting. But so yeah, there's your warp drive right there. And let's just take a look. See here, we're just going to look for a few more interesting shots here, because I don't want to make this video really long. The point is, the main point of this video is find some Valerian novels if you like science fiction and read them. Read up on them. There's wonderful stuff in here, but too much wonderful stuff really to go into. There's another shot of Central Point there. That's the end of part 1. Now look at this beginning here. Look at the dramatic spotting of blacks. Valerian is doing some sort of repair, and Laureline calls out to him, and they are getting caught in some sort of they were jumping at faster than light travel, and something very wrong happened and distorted them, created this distorted world which they need to try to get out of. There's the ship that is not the Millennium Falcon again. Some great visual effects here. They managed to set it down and get back to normal. There's another shape-shifting creature that they meet. It's able to shift into different shapes. This adventure takes them, you know, out of the space environment. They quite often change environments more than once in a Valerian story. And here's the centaur-like bull creatures, very warlike creatures here. There's a lot of action with these creatures. And they have to palaver and negotiate with them, and they wind up falling in with these performers who are putting on a show, a sort of a carnival type show, and they wind up resolving it through this carnival-like exhibition. Wonderful story. There's quite a bit of action here at the end. Let's just skip. Here's the end of part 2. Now, this is such a scene that is. When you look at this scene, it's almost impossible not to think of a dozen science fiction movies that have ripped off that shot to one extent or another. I just want to say, if you've seen The Fifth Element, and if you didn't watch my other video about the movie, I mentioned this, but The Fifth Element was largely designed by this Mézières. I'm going to take a shot at pronouncing it, the artist of Valerian. He took a year off from Valerian when he was working on this graphic novel. In between these two, he took a year off to work on this movie called The Fifth Element. And then the movie was thrown into doubt. It was shifted onto the back burner. It was what they say, put into development hell, where it became uncertain if it was ever actually going to get made or not. Well, when he was designing things for it, when the artist from Valerian was designing things for The Fifth Element, the hero was originally in the script supposed to be a factory worker who worked at a rocket ship factory. But then he finished his design work and he went back to work on Valerian. And when he finished this graphic novel, the next one, he sent the director a copy of the graphic novel. And the director's reading it, and they get to this part with a taxi driver with a flying cab. Does this look familiar? Flying cab negotiating its way through traffic, and it's a great sequence here. Flying cab, and it's bouncing off things. Some of the other cabs are shooting at it. And as we see this sequence, it looks very much like a sequence from straight out of The Fifth Element. That's because the director who received the free graphic novel read it and was so impressed by this sequence that when the film was able to come out of development hell and go back into production and actually get made, the director rewrote his script to make the factory worker, who was the protagonist, into a cab driver. And they basically lifted this sequence out of Valerian and put it into The Fifth Element. Here we see a little bit more of it. And that's how the hero of The Fifth Element became a cab driver. Also, when he did those rewrites, the artist from Valerian also took a little bit more time off from drawing Valerian to design some more stuff. So if you like the way The Fifth Element looks, this is where it came from this artist. This is specifically where the taxi cab sequence came from, was from this artist and from this particular graphic novel. And this is the name of this graphic novel is the Circles of Power, and it's part of the New Future trilogy in this book that you can probably still find used. Just looking at some nice aliens here. There's a nice shot of an alien bar there. You notice in the background there's the three-breasted go-go dancer doing some sort of sexy dance. And drunkenness, drunkenness looks about the same regardless of what species you are. These species have wonderful expressions of people who are imbibing and indulging themselves. There's that flying cab again. Some great flying vehicle action here. Some more flying cab sequences. And here's a badass woman right here. Now look at how these blacks are spotted. It's so dramatic. Picking up this wreck. It's a wonderful dramatic shot. This is just great drama here. Aliens are always, and here I love this sequence with Laureline. She's talking to the badass woman, and she's a little bothered by this smoke. The badass woman is smoking like crazy, and the whole room is smoky, so she's coughing. She says, "Couldn't you smoke somewhere else?" Yet what she's holding is not burning in any sort of conventional sense. It's just giving off smoke, and you have the feeling it's sort of like what the kids all use today, the smokeless cigarette tobacco. I can't even think of what they're called. But anyways, she has this device here that she's smoking without a flame, apparently. And it's bothering Laureline quite a bit. And she's strong-arming Laureline. There has some violence that resolves this, but Laureline is not a person to mess with, and she's proven that over and over again in these books. The aliens are great. Look at this amazing shot here of this chaotic sort of cityscape, just overbuilt like crazy. Again, wonderful science fiction settings on practically every page. And you look at great use of drama, great use of black and white here, the black and white ink drawing with the effect around it. It's beautiful. Some nice realism there. Scientific realism. It's fake realism. It's faked in realism, but it gives you a very realistic sense. And here's our information sellers again. These guys, they pop up at the darndest places. They like to sell information. Very handy for moving a plot forward. And look at the great drama here as these ships come. And lots of stuff here in the end. The Hyper Prince appears. I'm not going to go into too much of the ending. Don't want to show you too much. But that's not Darth Vader. That's Valerian. He's a great science fiction character, and you should definitely check him out and read some more of his stuff. So that's all about the comic book art of Valerian, and I'll be posting some more videos soon. Thanks for watching.